Okay, let's just jump right in. It turns out history does repeat itself, and America, well, it seems we just got caught coaching our own adversary on how to dismantle U.S. foreign policy.
It's more than just a political scandal. I mean, this is a profound operational and frankly, a security failure.
A security failure.
Absolutely. So our mission today is a deep dive. We're looking at sources from a huge multi-decade RAND Corporation report on U.S.-Russia policy,
Right.
all the way to these very recent, just leaked transcripts detailing a highly confidential peace negotiation that's happening right now.
And for you, the listener, the core mission here is to understand a really fundamental question in foreign policy.
Uh-huh.
When you're dealing with a major rival, does making concessions, accommodating them, actually stabilize things long term? Or does it just embolden them to ask for more?
And we have to start with the news hook on this one because it perfectly lays out that exact dilemma. We're looking at the transcript of a leaked phone call.
From October 14th.
Right. October 14th, yeah. Between an unofficial presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Vladimir Putin's top foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov.
And this is where it gets just wild. The American envoy, Witkoff, he wasn't just talking, he was actively coaching the Russian aide.
Coaching him on exactly how to pitch the U.S. president to get what Russia wanted.
It's incredible.
It is. The transcript shows Witkoff laying out these specific psychological buttons to push. He tells Ushakov that Putin should, and I'm quoting here, lavish praise on the president.
For what?
For a totally separate Gaza ceasefire plan, and to call him a man of peace. The whole point was to use flattery to bypass the formal State Department process.
And get a win for Moscow. So did it work?
Oh, it paid off for Russia almost instantly. Within days of that call, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy came to the White House.
Right, I remember this. He was asking for long-range Tomahawk missiles.
He was, and that request was denied. Our sources are confirming that this move immediately put Ukraine on the, quote, diplomatic defensive. It signaled that U.S. support was starting to dry up.
Which leads right to this new peace plan.
The 28-point peace plan. It was largely put together by Witkoff and his team, and critics in D.C. are calling it a near-perfect wish list for Moscow.
And the demands are huge, right? Ukraine has to give up the entire Donbas region.
The entire Donbas region, which Russia illegally annexed, and agree legally to never, ever join NATO.
So you have U.S. representatives basically packaging Russia's top demands into a formal proposal?
Right.
The criticism must have been immediate.
It was, and even from within the Republican Party, Representative Don Bacon was really direct about it.
What did he say?
He said the transcript proved Witkoff favored the Russians and, quote, cannot be trusted to lead these talks. His takeaway was pretty damning.
Yeah.
He basically asked if a paid Russian agent could have gotten a better deal for Moscow.
Wow. Okay, so that's the policy failure. But you said this was also a major national security lapse.
Mm-hmm.
How so?
Well, it's about how all of this was being discussed. We're talking about incredibly sensitive diplomacy that impacts all of Europe.
And it wasn't happening in a secure facility?
Not in a CIF, no. It was all being done over the commercial app signal.
Okay, for anyone who doesn't know, a SCIF is a sensitive compartmented information facility. It's basically a secure vault for talking about classified info. Why would they skip that?
To operate outside the formal system, to keep it off the books. But in doing that, they just opened the door to huge risks.
What kind of risks?
The Pentagon had already put out warnings to government officials saying that signal was being targeted by Russia-aligned threat actors.
Hackers, basically.
Hackers using phishing schemes, trying to get in through linked devices. And to make it even worse, we know at least one of the officials in these chats was physically in Russia.
Inside Russia. Potentially in the Kremlin itself.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And using Russian telecommunications infrastructure, I mean, you couldn't create a better opportunity for espionage if you tried.
So you're bypassing security protocols, you're bypassing federal laws on keeping records. It just looks like a total disregard for U.S. national security.
That's what critics are saying. That secrecy from the American government became more important than security from our adversaries.
Which brings us back to that core question from the RAND report. Why even try this policy of accommodation in the first place?
Yeah.
What's the thinking?
So this is what RAND calls the less hardline approach. It's a strategy where a big power, like the U.S., tries to advance its own interest by, proactively addressing a rival's concerns.
Giving them something, they want to get something you need.
Exactly. And what the U.S. needs right now, or what some strategists argue we need, is to free up resources.
To focus on China.
To focus on the bigger long-term challenge of China's rise. If you can lower the cost and the risk in Europe, it frees up a tremendous amount to focus on the Pacific.
That makes pragmatic sense, but that's where the big debate really kicks in.
Right. Opponents look at this 28-point plan, they look at ceding territory and blocking NATO, and they call it dangerous appeasement.
They argue it just makes America look weak.
Weak and irresolute. The fear is that accommodation doesn't bring stability. It just shows the other side that being aggressive works. So they harden their position and push for more.
So the big question is, what does history actually say? Is that fear justified?
Well, that's what the RAND study spent years looking at, and their conclusion is pretty clear. They found that these limited, less hardline approaches can sometimes get you, quote, limited but durable gains, little wins. But they're overwhelmingly unlikely to stabilize the relationship long term.
Why not? What's a consistent point of failure?
Because they never address the core structural conflicts that are driving the whole rivalry.
Yeah.
We're treating the symptoms, but you're ignoring the root disease.
Let's get into the case studies because they really show this. The first one is the 2009 U.S.-Russia reset.
The reset, yeah. Under the Obama administration, this was the ultimate less hardline policy, all about engagement, rejecting linkage so you could cooperate on one thing even if you disagreed on another.
And it did get some wins, right?
Oh, for sure. Big wins for U.S. priorities. You got the New START Treaty on nuclear arms reduction. Russia helped get stronger UN sanctions on North Korea and Iran. Those were real achievements.
But the report says it had a fatal flaw. The U.S. was unwilling to negotiate on core conflicts of interest. What were those?
It was all about the security of Europe. The U.S. refused to really negotiate on missile defense systems in Europe and, crucially, kept pushing for NATO to expand to places like Ukraine and Georgia.
So we were basically ignoring Russia's biggest, most fundamental security complaints about NATO pushing right up to its borders.
Exactly. So the result, just like the RAND model would predict, was that the cooperation just fizzled out. By 2012, it was fading, and by 2013, the whole reset was over. The core conflicts just swallowed up the small areas of agreement.
Okay, what about the other big example? The U.S.-Soviet detente in the 70s.
Right, from 69 to 75, this was a high point for accommodation. It showed that a political settlement was at least possible after decades of the Cold War.
And it produced some huge arms control treaties. The ABM treaty was a big one.
A very big one. But at the exact same time the U.S. and Soviets were making progress on arms control in Europe, Moscow was still funding expansionist movements all over the developing world.
In Global South.
Right. And Moscow's view was that this was fine, that this was just agreed upon competition. The ideological battle would continue, just without a nuclear war.
But that's not how it was seen in the U.S.
Not at all. The scale of Soviet involvement in places like Angola and Ethiopia completely destroyed the political will in the U.S. to keep accommodating them. Congress and the public just wouldn't stand for it.
So the core rivalry was still raging everywhere else.
And that's what ultimately killed détente.
Which brings us right back to today and this 28-point plan. It feels like we're just setting up to repeat the same mistakes.
It's the same historical dilemma playing out in real time. The plan is aiming for a cold peace, an immediate ceasefire. But the price is huge concessions from Ukraine.
Territory, a smaller military, and no NATO. Ever.
And our European allies are getting really nervous. Their big fear is that a quick ceasefire just gives Russia time to, in their words, regroup, learn lessons, and up their defense complex to have another go in a few years.
So that's the core of the historical critique then. If limited deals always fail because they don't solve the fundamental problem.
Which is Russia's belief that it's entitled to a sphere of influence.
Right. Then how can concessions that only address the symptoms, like drawing a line for NATO, ever bring lasting peace?
That's a great question. The danger is that these current negotiations, this Russian wish list, they risk validating Moscow's whole expansionist project without getting an enforceable long-term peace in return.
You're basically creating the exact conditions for the next war.
That's the fear. And to sum up what the RAND study found over decades, they saw no real evidence that accommodation made rivals immediately more aggressive.
Okay, so it didn't directly embolden them in that sense.
Right. But what it did find consistently was that failing to address the core conflicts guaranteed that the relationship would fall apart again and lead to another crisis down the road.
And the risk today is even higher because of how this is being done. No secure channels, no formal process, just a focus on a quick fix.
A quick ceasefire instead of confronting the real conflict over Europe's future. The ultimate cost here might not just be giving up the Donbass.
What is it then?
The cost is making these huge, irreversible concessions only to watch the relationship fall apart again anyway, because the core problem, Russia's view of its security and its neighbors, is still there, completely unresolved.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought for now. The greatest cost of accommodating a rival this way might not be the actual territory you give up or the treaty you sign.
So what is it?
It's the political ammunition you give to people back home who wanted conflict all along. When a negotiation fails this spectacularly, because of bad strategy and terrible security, it guarantees that future policy won't be driven by diplomacy.
It'll be driven by suspicion.
By deep suspicion and escalating hostility. It makes future conflict a much more likely outcome.